Cameron, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, what's my business worth?
Man, that is a big question, a bit of a loaded question. We at FRAXN don't actually do any mergers and acquisition valuation work. We work with very closely with Potomac and have a great relationship with them. They're kind of the kings, the experts in that area. But in our relationship, right, us doing the bookkeeping, do the accounting, we obviously give very key inputs for their process and their valuation process going to market, all that good stuff. So probably the single biggest variable in that component or in that process is going to be EBITDA. I'm sure everyone's heard EBITDA, whether you know what it is or not, right? EBITDA is going to be one of the key factors in determining the valuation of your business. Other metrics are also important, right? You know, revenue, gross profit margin, other things that we track diligently, including our KPI outputs. But EBITDA specifically is kind of the top dog when it comes to metrics. So what it stands for is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which you don't need to memorize that. Really all you need to know is that the whole idea of it is to give you a simplified view of earnings and do a better job of measuring earnings potential as opposed to a metric like net income, which can have some noise in it.
So there are a lot of people that have come to learn about EBITDA with just the volume of transactions. And so maybe they've heard the term, but maybe they haven't. And I think oftentimes operators are focused on top line revenue or net income. Is EBITDA something that they can track maybe on a profit and loss statement?
Yeah, and that's one of the things we do at FRAXN is we have it subtotaled for you guys on the P&L, so it's very clear and easy. You don't have to do any calculations or math to back into what the number is, right? But to keep it simple, you know, you start with your revenue, you have your cost of services, which gives you your gross profit. You then have your operating expenses, and then essentially once you remove operating expenses, you have EBITDA. There might be some one-offs here and there, some other income or expenses. But for the most part, you're looking at revenue minus cost of services gives you gross profit, minus operating expenses is going to give you EBITDA.
Nice. And so a little bit above elevated, if you were to think of it from the bottom up, like how would you think about it?
So from the bottom up, obviously net income is going to be the lowest subtotal, right? It's revenue minus absolutely everything gives you your net income. So what EBITDA is it's your net income, and then you add back any interest expense or income that was on the P&L, any depreciation, amortization expense, or any taxes, right? And that's where, you know, getting back to the kind of simplified view of earnings. Another perk of EBITDA is that it offers a more standardized comparison. So if I have a business, Patrick, that has $100 in net income, you have a business that has $500 in net income, everyone might say, man, Cameron's business doesn't have as high of earnings potential, or maybe the core operations of the business aren't as good or aren't as efficient. But it might be the case that I had $400 of interest expense, you have $0 of interest expense. And so in terms of EBITDA, my 100 of net income plus 400 of interest expense gives me an EBITDA of 500. You might have $500 in net income, no interest expense, so your EBITDA is also 500, right? And so in terms of measuring our business's ability to generate income or generate earnings, the core businesses are actually very similar. I just decided to finance all of my operations, right, by taking out loans and incurring interest. You might have decided to do it by taking out no debt, right? So you have no interest. From an acquirer's perspective, Cameron's debt isn't going to be my debt. So I don't care if he financed it or if he didn't finance it. I'm buying the core operations of the business, which in this case would be the same as yours, Patrick. So that might have been a lot, but yeah, that's kind of the idea. It simplifies earnings. It gives you a more standardized comparison between companies. Right. And one of the big things we offer at FRAXN is a very large benchmarking group. So instead of looking at my net income versus that guy's net income versus that guy's, we use EBITDA for that very reason. It's just a better metric to measure potential earnings and gives you a more standardized comparison.
So with you have merger and acquisitions experience. We have some on our support team as well. How does that help us have conversations around EBITDA as they're like, what does this even mean? Why is it important? Why is it a key performance indicator at Fraction?
Some of the reasons I've already said. I think it helps business owners understand their earnings potential and measure the quality of the core operations of the business better than net income would. But to your point, when it comes to valuations, comes to potentially wanting to exit, sell your business, it's going to be a crucial component to that and probably dictate value more than any other metric. And so it's important that our clients know, or the business owners know what it is, how to affect it, right? So going back to revenue, cost of services, operating expenses, knowing how to manage those costs, because ultimately that's going to impact EBITDA more than, hey, should I take out this note or that loan, or buy this vehicle, depreciate it X, Y, Z, whatever it might be. So I'd say that's just kind of baseline. But then in terms of my background, once again, I would say Potomac are definitely the experts, but having a background in it, helping clients understand what add backs might look like. Excessive owner comp could be added back. If you have any one time, odd legal settlements or something, those expenses would be added back. Maybe you have a couple of branches, you sold one branch, right? The gain on that sale wouldn't go towards EBITDA. So there are things that help clients think through as they kind of want to go down that route of exiting, that just general conversations, helping them get a better picture of the situation. And then ultimately connecting them with Potomac, who would really, white glove service, walk them through every step of the process and help them maximize their sale.
Yeah. And we definitely love the relationship we have with Potomac. I was a long time client of Potomac and ultimately exited a few years ago using them. Did a bang up killer job on that. One thing that I love, our clients have that opportunity to just get the relationship. But I think back how much data that comes back and forth, to keep my numbers in the right chart of accounts, to keep it updated, to get all the information over, where we're able to do a lot of that heavy lifting and get most of those answers over so that they can know with relative certainty, what is my business worth, to ultimately answer the question. And Potomac does that. The market's dynamic. We don't touch M&A. We focus on bookkeeping and accounting and doing that one thing well. But you mentioned add backs, which is interesting. So we track EBITDA, but we don't track adjusted EBITDA or seller's discretionary expenses, adjusted EBITDA. There's a different ways of hearing it and slicing that up, but we track EBITDA as one of the KPIs. But you also mentioned adjusted EBITDA, or maybe it's add backs or seller's discretionary expenses. There's things that are just I'm choosing to do differently in my business that might be out of norm. What does that look like? What's that gap between EBITDA and adjusted EBITDA?
Yeah, so I think going back to the purpose of EBITDA, right? It's trying to measure the earnings potential of a business, the earnings potential of the core business. So it's removing a lot of noise. It's trying to simplify things. And in terms of reported EBITDA, right, it's the net income plus interest, depreciation, taxes, amortization, all that stuff. EBITDA is a good starting point. It's not a perfect number, right? And so whenever you're going to go sell your business or you're going to go acquire a business, oftentimes reported EBITDA still isn't the best measure of the earnings potential of that business, right? And so the walk from reported EBITDA to adjusted EBITDA is going to include add backs. And once you get to adjusted EBITDA, that's kind of everyone's acknowledgement of hey, this is going to be the best number or figure for us to use in our valuations to measure our earnings potential, things like that. So common examples of add backs going from reported EBITDA to adjusted EBITDA would be, any one-time legal settlements, excessive owner's compensation. You mentioned seller discretionary expenses, Patrick, right? So if you're an owner just kind of running everything through the business, right, there's no real reason for those expenses in terms of actually running the business. Those could be added back. There's a whole host of things that could be added back. Essentially, if they're not business expenses or if they're not core to running the business, you're got a chance of adding them back. Vice versa, any gains that are one time or that aren't ordinary, right? Those gains could be removed from EBITDA and actually lower adjusted EBITDA. So it goes both ways. But once again, the whole idea is getting the best number that actually measures the earnings potential of the business.
So if I hear businesses are selling for 5 times adjusted EBITDA or 10 times adjusted EBITDA or 15 times adjusted EBITDA, as a seller or currently business owner, let's just say I own it outright by myself. I'm thinking about, 5 times adjusted EBITDA. What does that mean to me in like almost layman's terms?
If I'm hearing you correctly, it's literally you take your reported EBITDA, you work with a firm like Potomac who's going to help you identify all the add backs, help you get to the correct best adjusted EBITDA number. And then if the multiple is 5, you would take that number times 5. If it's times 10, right, or whatever the multiple is, you're applying that multiple to that adjusted EBITDA number. And then more or less, that's going to be the purchase price of the business. So if your reported EBITDA is $1 million, and then you have $500,000 worth of add backs, adjusted EBITDA is $1.5 million. If it's a 10x or a multiple of 10, you're going to have $15 million purchase price.
Sure. And I would be thinking like, hey, this business is like 10 years worth of my almost personal income. Would you say that? Like that's the trade-off?
I mean, yes and no, right? So as a business owner, are you paying yourself a salary? Are you taking distributions? If you're distributing everything that's kind of above and beyond what the business needs, then maybe. If you're a business owner that turns around and says, hey, we're going to invest everything we made and put it back into the business, put it into advertising, maybe open a new location, maybe do this or that, then I would say no, because that money's never leaving the business and going to your personal bank account anyways. But yeah, so that there's more you can look into there. But yeah, I guess just kind of a general simplified way to think about it.
Let's say, Cameron, the word on the street, because it's a small industry, like niche industry, businesses I hear are selling for 10 times adjusted EBITDA. I haven't talked to Potomac to see my particular circumstances, but what would be the difference between me running my business for 10 more years and just doing it myself versus taking an exit now and capturing 10 times adjusted EBITDA?
Yeah, so there's obviously like the time value of money perspective, right? So $1 million now is worth more than $100,000 each year for the next 10 years. There might be personal reasons. You might be ready to retire, right? You might want to pass the business on to someone else, kick your feet up in the sand on the beach and have some beverages right there. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why you might want to leave the business. But in general, a large chunk of money now is worth more than that same dollar value spread out over many years. And so the biggest thing is to decide, am I ready to leave the business? Am I ready to get out of the industry? Am I ready to move on to something else? And if the answer is yes, then financially it's going to be better for you to sell now than have the same level of earnings over the next 10 years. Now, if you're saying, hey, over the next 10 years, I think I can grow the business X amount, well then, hey, you're probably going to do better growing it and then selling it down the road. But there's always the chance that you don't grow it like you want to, right? So it's weighing your options and understanding the risks, the pros and cons. If you know you want to get out of the business, you're better off selling now than, keeping the same level of activity for the next 10 years and working those 10 years.
So if someone asks Cameron, like, what should my EBITDA margin be, then what guidance would you give?
Yeah, so good question, right? So EBITDA, that's what we've been talking about, this actual dollar amount. EBITDA margin is just that number divided by revenue. So similar to gross profit margin, right? It's the dollar amount divided by revenue to get a percentage. And in terms of EBITDA margin, what we're typically looking for is 20%. That's kind of the gold standard of, hey, are you above 20%? Are you below 20%? If you're below it, there's typically some things we can pretty quickly point to, or that jump out as some expenses that might be out of whack, or maybe a little high or a little variance that you could work on and focus on and bring it up to 20%. But yeah, and we have plenty of clients that are well above 20% in terms of EBITDA margins, and those are the companies that are doing really well. They're running super efficiently, and have a good handle on their expenses.
Have you seen clients make significant changes, like once they realize that their EBITDA margin might be out of line, where they've gone and made specific changes in their business?
Yes is the short answer, right? And I think gross profit margin gets a lot of run, and it's an important KPI certainly, but we've had a number of clients who are very, very focused on gross profit margin. And so they might have, 60, 65% gross profit margins, which are really good, but then they don't pay as much attention to the operating expenses of the business, those fixed costs. And so whenever we work our way down to EBITDA and EBITDA margin, they might have an EBITDA margin of, 18, 19, 20%, which once again, it's not bad, but we can quickly point out some areas where those operating expenses are a little out of line. We bring that to their attention and they've corrected that. And now they have EBITDA margins north of 25%. So it's definitely some conversations here and there. And if they have the processes and the infrastructure at the business to address those areas of concern, like they did, they were able to quickly turn it around, focus on those costs, and improve EBITDA margin dramatically in a short period of time.
Cameron, let's say I'm not thinking about selling for years and years and years to come. Okay. Is EBITDA important to me today, or should I just focus my attention elsewhere?
No, I think it's always important, which is why we always track it. So even if valuation exiting, that's not even in your head and won't be for a long, long time, it's still very important to track. One, kind of going back to what we said, I think it's the best metric to measure the operational performance of the business. It gives you a very clear single number to look at that kind of measures your earnings potential. Another reason might be if you want to get a loan, a lot of banks will request financials. And a lot of times what they're looking at is EBITDA, right? EBITDA, once again, is a good indicator of how the business is performing, its ability to earn, and in the terms of banking, right, and getting a loan, it's going to assess your ability to service the debt that you take out. And so a lot of bankers will look at EBITDA as well. There's really never a situation where you shouldn't be focused on EBITDA, where you shouldn't care if it's good or bad. So always going to be an important metric for you to look at as a business owner, whether you're trying to sell or not.
Just thinking in the last year or so, can you think of any trends in direction of EBITDA or maybe cost that have impacted it the most?
Yeah, and obviously we don't see the industry as a whole, right? But working with the hundreds and hundreds of clients that we have, I would say overall have seen upward trends. One, I think it's conversations like these, bringing it to our clients' attention of how important it is. Very few of our clients, when they come to us, are tracking or managing EBITDA or thinking of it as a metric that is important, right? They're looking at revenue, which is also important. They're looking at gross profit, which is, yes, also important. But EBITDA doesn't get a ton of focus. So very few of our clients even look at it or pay attention to it when they come to us. And so I think just in working with us, we've seen upward trends there with the higher focus on it. But yeah, in terms of costs that have probably been affecting it the most, it's always going to be your people costs, right? People costs are going to be the most expensive costs any business has in our industry, right? And so making sure you're just as efficient as you can be with your people, making sure there's not, you might want some redundancy in some roles, but making sure there's not a ton of overlap, incentivizing employees to be as efficient as possible. Yeah, I would say people costs, and particularly your office staff, executives, your non-technicians, right? That's where we see probably the most bloat in terms of payroll costs or just expenses in general.
I know we want to see our clients succeed. I feel like you and Colton and Annette and our account managers, they're the biggest cheerleaders for our clients' businesses, and keeping an eye, making sure that their businesses are moving in the right direction and shining light on where they're not, and setting those targets along the way and tracking them monthly and seeing what direction are you moving against EBITDA, for example. I think of almost a Rolodex, naturally connectors here, and saying like, hey, is my advertising in line with my peers, or is my insurance in line? And we can look at, other data to pinpoint that, but also I think with insurance specifically, I talked to a client last week. He's saving $100,000 a year just insurance expenses because we called it out, gave him some options on who to speak with, and now he's, it's going to the bottom line. So could say it's improving his EBITDA, if you will.
Yes, no, definitely. Yeah, we obviously won't name names, but that's I think that's situation's probably more common than people would think. I don't know if everyone's going to save $100,000 a year, right? But insurance is a place where a lot of people can save money just by shopping, getting connected with the right brokers, right? Which we do often with our clients, recommending them to certain folks. But yeah, a lot of us will have insurance. We don't really think about it. We just renew the next year, and then we renew the next year. And then before you know it, once someone calls it out, and we're like, oh man, we're spending way too much money on insurance.
And then advertising, where we could see like how much money are you putting into advertising versus how much growth are you getting? And I know it's just become a lot more competitive, and so that dollar doesn't go as far as it used to in advertising. So keeping that sharp in terms of what's really moving the needle for them.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously that's something we're going to track in terms of advertising, marketing expense, but it's also important for the client to know which advertising channels or marketing channels are actually providing a return and which ones aren't, and kind of getting a more nuanced, granular view as opposed to a more macro, holistic view of, well, here's my spend. Am I getting a return or not in general? Right? You want to know which specific channels are actually providing that return for you.
I'm curious, before your time, you've been with FRAXN for 3 years now. Before that, what was your experience with EBITDA or just M&A?
I guess after graduating, I spent 5 years doing financial due diligence in the transaction advisory world. So came out of school, went directly to KPMG's transaction advisory group, or they would have called it deal advisory, right? Every firm has a different name, but in their deal advisory group doing financial due diligence. So working with private equity clients whenever they wanted to buy or sell a company, doing the due diligence for them, right? So EBITDA was the number we worked on and helped them find, right? And so we were actually the ones responsible for going from EBITDA to adjusted EBITDA, right? And helping them identify what that adjusted EBITDA number really is. Was there for 2.5 years at KPMG, and then did another 2.5 years with Alvarez and Marsal and their transaction advisory group. And so, yeah, did those, combined it was about 5 years, maybe 2.5 years, 2 years, but then got plugged in with FRAXN and you, Patrick, and been doing this for, like you said, about 3 years now.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I really appreciate your experience with M&A, although, again, we don't do M&A. Clearly don't do M&A. But I think that brings a lot of insight to our clients and helps them out to make sure, like, hey, this is what EBITDA is. This is what you can do to help improve it. This is why it's important, and keep them in front of it. Keep EBITDA in front of them on a monthly basis. Just keep moving in the right direction.
No, definitely. And I think one more thing I want to say, and just shout out Potomac again. They're great. They're awesome at what they do. Honestly, the best at what they do in the industry. But one thing with our relationship with them, if you're a client of ours, we'll cover the cost of evaluation for them to provide you a valuation once a year. So, which has been great for clients to get. They get feedback on where the value of their business is. Some things that Potomac calls out as things to work on, or things to improve, or things that are affecting the valuation. And so the clients that have taken us up on that, I think they've really seen a benefit from it. I've really appreciated getting those valuations. And once again, it's at no cost to the client. We're covering that for them. So yeah, Potomac's been great, and our clients that have worked with them have really enjoyed it.
And for full disclosure, there's no money exchange between us and Potomac in terms of, hey, let's tell you about another FRAXN client. It's two separate businesses, and then our clients just want to work with Potomac, and of course they do. So I get asked all the time, like, hey, did you get a kickback on that, or did you? Like, no money's exchanged there. I just love the position that we're in to, like, freely tell people about them and to be the best cheerleader for them. Like, I really want, like you and the rest of the team, really want the best thing for the client at the end of the day. And so we're able to just freely put out this information, make recommendations, and share that value with them. But I had personal experience with Potomac. I can't say enough great things, and I appreciate what you said. I mean, they're definitely close friends over there. Albeit a little bit biased, but there's not money exchange, and so it's not for our gain. In fact, when a client sells, and we've had a few here recently, ultimately exit their business, it's actually a hit over a fraction. We're losing a client, but it's what's best for them, and that's what we want to celebrate.
Yeah, definitely.
On our next video, we're going to hit up another important KPI, recurring revenue. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you like and subscribe. And by the way, if you know someone that could use FRAXN, just by telling them about FRAXN or introducing them to FRAXN could earn you $500. So stay tuned. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.